everything in Flutter is a widget. And so just to show you again, I just want to delete everything below the main function, and let's just start this from scratch. So our main function is going to run my app, which we're going to create here the stateless widget called my app. And just like before, we're always going to need to have a material app in here. And if you look in the material app for the home, this is where it's going to go to as soon as the app starts up. And the very first widget I want to show you is called a scaffold. Now, if you save this and you run it, a scaffold is, as you can see, it's just a white blank app. And by the way, just before we move further, you can see these blue squiggles. It's because they want us to put the const tag on, but I don't want you to worry too much about what const and final means, because it's not a huge deal for us right now. So if you hover over the blue squiggles, just go to the quick fix, and let's say ignore prefer const constructors for this file. So I'll explain a little bit later on about what const and final means. But again, just to keep everyone on the same page, so in our material app, we're going to display a scaffold. And the scaffold is a sort of skeleton widget that holds the different parts of your app. So if I was to show you here, the first thing you can control is the background color. So I could say blue. And by the way, I don't like to see that debug banner, so I'm just going to check that to be false. So yeah, we can choose a background color. And again, if you hover over this, you can see that there's a lot of different shades of that particular color. So you can choose the strength. Cool, so just pick whatever color you want. Now, the other component in the scaffold is, you can see here, the body. So in the body, I want to show you one of the most fundamental widgets in Flutter, which is called a container. And a container is a really flexible widget that you're going to use for many different purposes. So just to illustrate what it does, here we can specify the height and width. Let's say like 300. And let's also give it a color. So if you save that, you can see there's our container. Now, you can wrap this container in another widget called center, which does exactly what it says. It just centers it. And like I said before, everything in Flutter is a widget. So this container widget, you can give it another child and put in another widget. So here, let's introduce the text widget and say Mitch Coco. And you can see there is our text. Now let's just change the color of this container to green so that we can actually see the text. And one thing you're going to use a lot in containers is this padding. So if I just say padding all for 25, you can see it's got some spacing around that text widget now. And there's a lot of different versions of padding you can use. So for example, a lot of the times symmetric is useful. So you can specify it just for the horizontal or just for the vertical. And then the other one you will need to use is the only. So you can specify padding for only a particular direction, like left or top, bottom, right, etc. But for our purpose, let's just say we're going to put a padding of 25 all around. And if you want to decorate this even further, you can go to the decoration. And in this box decoration, if I just show you here and I save it, this is a very common error you'll face. And what it's saying is you cannot provide a color and a decoration. So if you want to specify some further decoration, then you have to put the color inside the decoration. So everything should be working fine. Now, what can you decorate further? Well, one thing that I do all the time is curving the corners. So you can see this border radius. We can make it, say, 20. And you can see the corners are much more rounder. So this is a very common use. And coming back to our text widget, we can, of course, switch up the style. So in the text style, we can of course change the color. We can also change the font size, which, by the way, with any of this stuff, if you hover over it, you can see the information. So it says it defaults to 14. So let's say like 28. And you can also change the font weight, make it bold. So you can change pretty much anything about it. So that's a text widget. Now, the next widget I want to show you here is an icon. Now, by default, Flutter has a lot of icons, so you can just pick whichever ones you want. Now, let's say I'm just going to go for the favorite icon, which is a love heart. And inside this widget, you can change everything you want to. Again, like color. You can change the size, and so on. So this big collection of default icons are going to be pretty useful. Just out of the box, you can use any of these easily. Cool, so we've just been working on the body of the scaffold, which, by the way, if you look at the side here, you can also minimize certain widgets. But let's go to our app bar now, and you can give it the widget called app bar. And again, just to save it, you can see there it is. And then inside this app bar, we can specify the title. And you can also change the background color, of course, to whatever you like. And if you look carefully there, there's a little shadow because it has some elevation. So if you want, you can set the elevation to be 0, and that makes it much more flat with no shadows. Cool. And then if you specify this leading, you can give it an icon for the left-hand side. If you want to put an icon on the right-hand side, that's going to be in the actions. And you can see with the actions, it requires a list. So you can put more than one if you want. But let's say I want to put an icon button here. Then, yep, you can see there it is. Sweet, so that's the basics of the app bar. Now, just coming back to the body, I'm going to show you the next widget that is really important, and it's called a column. So I'll show you columns and rows, but just starting with a column, it requires a children of widgets. So let's just put in, say, 3 boxes here, and I'm going to make the first box just a container. Let's just have a height and width of 200 and make it deep purple. And then I'm just going to copy this exact same container, but maybe let's just make the colors a bit lighter. So if I save it, then there it is. Now let's actually go back to our scaffold and delete the background color so that we can see these better. Awesome. And let's also delete that app bar as well, since we're done looking at that for now. And let's just focus on this column. So columns are good widgets to display in a vertical fashion. And rows are going to do the same thing, but for the horizontal. And this current column that we have here, we have our 3 boxes. So a couple of things about a column is you can control this main axis alignment. And just to show you the differences, right? If I show you the center, it's just going to be aligned to the middle. You can also go for the end. And a lot of the times, space evenly comes in really handy, as well as space between. So a lot of different ways we can space out the UI. So that's main axis alignment. Now, the other one I want to illustrate is the cross-axis alignment. Now, to show this one, let's make our first box bigger and make the following boxes a little smaller. So if you save this, then we get this kind of 3 containers like this. And so we looked at the main axis alignment and how that changes the column. I also want to show you about the cross-axis alignment. So if you say start, then this will align everything to the left like this. And so we're looking at the other axis now. You can say end and it will align to that side, and center, of course. So using the cross axis and the main axis alignment, you can space these out however you like. Cool, so let's just bring them all back to the same size. Now you can see here in our containers, we very specifically gave them a height and a width, right? They are fixed to be a size of 200. Now let's say this last box here doesn't have a height, then it just disappears, obviously. But you can wrap this widget in another widget called an expanded widget. And this one is also super useful. And expanded widgets go well with columns and rows because what it does is it just expands the widget to fill up the rest of the space. So you can see that third box, if I save this, it just fills it up to fill the rest of the space. And so if I just get rid of these widths as well, and then I get rid of the heights for the first two containers, and let's just put them all in expanded widgets. Let's see what happens. Now, this is why I like expanded widgets a lot, because instead of manually setting a specific size, if I say like 3 expanded widgets, then it's going to divide the screen evenly into thirds. So it's going to be very proportioned out. And so one thing you can have a look at is this flex property. And if you hover over it, it's initially just a value of 1. And what the flex property tells us about is pretty much the ratio of this current widget in comparison to the other ones. So for example, right, if I say flex is 2, then that widget is going to be twice as big as the other. And if I say 3, it'll be 3 times as big as the other. So you can kind of have good ratios going on. Cool, so that's an expanded widget. Like I said, it goes hand in hand with columns and rows. So now let me show you one problem when you're using columns and rows. So let's say our first box has a height of 350. In fact, let's say all of these boxes have a height of 350, which is quite large. And if you save them, you can see it's not going to fit all on the screen, right? Like the bottom square doesn't fit. So you get this sort of overflow problem. And so now the next widget I want to introduce to you is called a list view. So if you just change that column to a list view and you save it, we're no longer going to get this problem, because what a list view does is pretty much the same as a column, but it can scroll. So now we have a scrollable list, which means all of our children should fit. And you can also control here the scroll direction. So it's going to be vertical by default, but let's say I want to make it horizontal. And let's give these guys some widths. Then you can have a horizontal list view as well. I didn't show you the row explicitly, but it's going to be the same as a column. But columns are vertical and rows are horizontal. So columns and rows are for vertical and horizontal UI layouts, and list views are used for when you want them to scroll. Now you can see the way we created this list view. We specified the children for the list view, right? You can also create them on demand by using a listview.builder. And this one will be really helpful as well. So in the item builder, you can create a list tile, which is another default widget. And we can specify the item count. So how many do we want to create? Well, let's say 10. And just to show you what's happening here, just for the title here, let's put in a text widget to display the index. So the index is going to be starting from 0, and we're going to go up until we have 10 items. So that's going to be 0 to 9. And you can see that index, if I print it, we have a vertical list like this. And so just to kind of connect this back to some of our previous concepts, let's say we have a list of names. So I got Mitch, Sharon, Vince. And let's say I just want to print these names in the list view. So if you look at the item count, again, instead of just manually specifying 10, you can say names.length. So this will just get the number of how long that list is. And then in the text, we can say names and just get the index. So we looked at lists earlier on in the course. So this is how we can display it now using a list view for the UI. So similar to list views, we also have grid views. So if I show you how to do a grid view, in the grid delegate, Just to keep it simple, the one I always like to use is the sliver grid delegate with fixed cross-axis count, which is a mouthful, but all this means is, let's say I'm going to put 8. It's just how many you want in each row for the grid. So let me show you here. Let's say like a chessboard, right? A chessboard is an 8 by 8 grid. So let's say for the item count, I want to have 64. And the item builder, let's just create a container here. And it looks like everything's stuck together, so we can't really see it. So let's just put some margin padding on the container. There it is. So there's our grid. That's 8 by 8. And so, like I said before, this grid delegate is just saying how many you want in each row. So right now we have 8 in each row. We can say 4. And so that's what that number is controlling. Awesome. So that's a grid. Now let's move on to a stack. Now, stack also has children, and what it does is, just like the name suggests, it stacks different widgets on top of each other. So let's illustrate this. So I'm going to have 3 different boxes. Let's have a big, medium, and then a small box. And so by default, you can see it's just all aligning to the top left corner. And stack has alignment properties just like columns and rows. So you could say, give me the center alignment. You can do bottom right and just anything you want. Awesome. Now the very last widget I want to show you for this particular section is a gesture detector. So let's just delete all this, and in the body, let's just go back to our very basic container. And maybe let's just give it a child, and let's just say like tap me, and let's put it in the middle, right? So everything in Flutter is a widget, which is really cool because you can just go to any of these widgets and you can wrap it with something called a gesture detector. And what that does is it just detects gestures from the user. And a very common gesture is the on tap. But you can see here there's all sorts of other ones like long press, double tap, things like that. And so if you specify this on tap method, this will do something when the user taps on this particular widget, which means anything on this screen, you can wrap it in a gesture detector, and so the user can tap on whatever you would like to be tapped. So I really love this widget. And so just to show you with our sort of console, just to show you that this actually works, you can see if I tap on this box, it'll just print it out, user tapped. And so now we can just start creating different methods and functions for this gesture detector. So just to show you in a bit more practical way, you can fill out the on-tap method just right there in the widget tree, but you can also separate out the function, which is probably a good idea. And so when we call this on-tap, then just go straight to this method. Awesome, so I hope some gears are turning and some dots are getting connected in your brain, but comment below and let me know if you have any issues with anything. I'll try to come and help around. But those are the most fundamental basic widgets that you need to know in Flutter. So now in the next section, let's look at some more practical ways to create some real functioning apps. Sweet, so now that we went over some of the fundamental widgets, now I'm going to show you a couple of widgets that have to do with navigation. So let's delete all this, and I'm going to create a folder called Pages. Oh, what's going on with this testing? Oh, let's just add this little const tag. Now in these pages, let's create first page. And let's just have it as a stateless widget with a blank scaffold. And let's create another page called the second page. Now when you come back to our main.dart file, in the home, this is where we created our scaffolds before, right? So now what we can do is just go directly to our first page. And it says auto import, so hit enter. And so now if you just restart the app, it'll just go straight to this first page. So just so that we know which page we're on, let's just create an app bar real quick and just say it in the title. And what we're going to do is in the body, in the middle, we're going to use a button. And when we click this button, let's try to navigate to the second page. So we have to specify the on pressed. And so when the user presses this button, let's try to navigate to this second page. So let me show you how to do that. We're going to use something called a navigator, and we're going to push to the second page. So if I just save this and I rerun it and I click on the button, then yep, it brings us to the second page, which also is a blank scaffold. So just so we know what we're looking at, let's create an app bar real quick. Sweet, and you can see automatically in the app bar, it's already got that back button. So this is why Flutter is really useful and easy to work with. And this is the basics of navigation. Now, a couple of things I want to show you is another way to sort of handle navigation, especially when you have a lot of different pages, is to use some routes. So in the material app, you can specify a few different routes. So for example, the first one, let's just call second page and give it the second page. And so once we have a route, what we can do is instead of this bit of code, we can just say navigator. And before we did push, but now we can say push named, and then we can just give the route name here. And so this one just makes it look a little nicer and easier to deal with. And of course, you can just add as many routes here as necessary. Awesome, so that's the basics of how to navigate to a different page. Now, what I want to show you is a very common way to handle navigation is to have a drawer. So if I just delete everything, and if you have an app bar and you also have a drawer, without even specifying anything here, you can see that there's already that menu icon on the top left. And if you click on it, it'll open up a blank drawer. So what we can do now is inside this drawer, we can start decorating things. So for example, like the background color. And the child, it's common to use just a big column here. And also for the very top, there's already a default widget that's really useful for this situation, which is called a drawer header. And all this does is, like, if I give it an icon, it just takes up a good chunk of space at the top. So this is where you would usually have your logo. And kind of similar to what we did before, let's just ignore these const tags for this for now. Yeah, we don't need to worry about that. Cool, so below this logo, we can now have a few list tiles. So say one for homepage, one for like a settings page. And so what we can put in here, now we can create a container with rows and columns and text widgets to create a nice looking tile. But because it's such a common use case, Flutter already has some nice tiles to use. So for example, we can use a list tile and then give it an icon and give it a text. And let's just copy this and do one for the settings as well. Cool. Now, if you look in the list tile, it's got that on tap. And so if we press this, then let's go to the home page. And so currently we've got first page and second page. So let's just delete that second page. And I'm just going to start creating some new pages here. So I'm just going to call it home page and then a settings page. So it's just going to be very similar to what we had before. Cool. And coming back to our main.dart file, let's get rid of this route and call it home page. And maybe another one for settings page. Awesome. So coming back to our drawer here, if I click on this home, I want to go to the home page. Right, so then now I can just use that navigator.push that we looked at before. And same thing for the settings page. Sweet. And again, just to come back to our other pages, let's just create a quick app bar so that we know what we're looking at. So if I just restart this, so I'm in my first page, go to our drawer, and then we can click on the home page and navigate around. Cool. Now one thing, I don't know if you noticed, but when I open up this drawer and I go to the home page, when I click back, it still shows the drawer. And if you look at most of the apps that we use today, that drawer should be closed when I go back. So what you're going to do is, first of all, we're going to pop the drawer. So navigator.pop, this will just exit whatever we're looking at currently. So we're going to pop the drawer first, and then we'll go to the home page. So if you just save this and restart it, what's going to happen is, let's open up the drawer, go to the home page, but then if I go back, the drawer is closed. And that's kind of the behavior that we want for most of our apps. Cool, so that's how you use a drawer, which is going to be very helpful to navigate around to different pages in your app. Now, another common way to do it is to use a bottom navigation bar. So this is also something that you see a lot in many apps, right? It's that bar on the bottom. So if you look at the bottom navigation bar, we can specify some items. And I'm going to have just say 3 things here. So the home, the profile, and the settings. And then so you can look at this and say bottom navigation bar item, and just give it the icon and the name. Sweet, and if you save this, you can see there it is on the bottom. Now, decoration, of course, we can make this look prettier by changing up the colors and things like that. But the main thing I want to show you here is how to navigate around. So if you click on it, nothing's going to happen. Okay, cool. Now, if you come back to our home page, I actually want to get rid of this app bar now. And I just want to show that it's a home page through the body. Because on our original page, we're already going to have an app bar. So I'll show you what I mean. Let's do the same thing for the settings page. And we're going to need one more page for the profile. Okay, awesome. So just coming back to our very first page, right? Let's create a list of pages. So we've got that home page, we've got the profile page, and the settings page. And then in the scaffold, if you go to the body, let's display the page of whatever we're looking at right now. So at the beginning of the course, we looked at how lists work. So if I say like, give me the 0th index for the page, that's going to be the home page, as you can see. If you go 1, that'll be the profile page, as you can see. And then finally, number 2 is going to be the settings page. So we're going to need an integer to sort of track which page we're looking at, right? So I'm going to create an integer called selected index. And let's just start off at 0, which is the home page. And then we've got these list of pages. And so now if you come back to the body, we can just say, show me the page of whatever the current selected index is. So it's going to start at 0. And then now finally, we just need a method to update the selected index. So navigate bottom bar, what we need as a parameter is an integer for the index, the new index that we're going to. So when this method is called, let's just set the state and just update our selected index to that new index here. Awesome. Now I just realized for us to use set state, we need this to be a stateful widget, right? Because we need the screen to update, but we actually made this as a stateless widget from the beginning. So if you're ever in this situation where you need to switch between stateless widgets and stateful widgets, you can just click and hover over the word stateless widget. And on Mac, if you press Command dot, you can see there's a convert to stateful widget. And so there's going to be a similar command for Windows as well. But you can convert this to a stateful widget. And the reason why I need to do this is because I just wanted to set the state and update the index. So now that we've got this nice method, if you go back to that bottom navigation bar, it says current index. Yep, we can give it our selected index, and also there's going to be an on tap. And so if we tap anything on the bottom, then let's navigate the bottom bar. So we're going to call that method. Awesome. And so if you just save this and you click around, then we can navigate between the 3 different pages. Cool. So then you can just go to these individual pages and decorate whatever you need to do. Sweet. So that's how we handle navigation in Flutter. Now I've opened up another brand new Flutter project, and every time you open up a new project, you always get this demo counter app, and it's worth having a look at individual bits and pieces of this code. But just to show you, I think it's a good idea to show you how to do this from scratch. So I'm just going to delete everything below the main function, and let's try to code up this demo counter app ourselves. So first of all, we're going to need to create my app. And as we discussed earlier, everything's going to start off from this material app. And for the home, let's just create a counter page. Now, when we create pages, it's a good idea to create them in a separate folder, just so that everything's organized. And so this counter page is going to be a stateful widget. So far we've been looking at stateless widgets, but now it's time to look at stateful widgets. So for now, let's just put in a blank scaffold, and let's come back to our main.dart file because we can now import what we just created. Cool. Now when we create an app on a very kind of high level, we need 3 things. We need a variable, we need a method, and we also need the UI, which is the kind of visual user interface that the user is going to interact with. So for our counter app, our variable is going to be an integer. And let's start it at 0. And we're going to create a method to increment the counter. So anytime that we call this method, then we want to get the counter and just ++, which means to increase by 1. Now, anytime that we change the value of something and we want it to be reflected in the app, we have to make sure to put it inside a set state. So set state is used for stateful widgets, and essentially what it does is it just rebuilds the widget. And so if you don't do this set state, then even though the counter value has incremented, it's not going to be reflected on the screen if we don't set the state and rebuild the widget. So that's the difference between stateless widgets and stateful widgets. Stateless widgets are widgets that don't change ever, whereas stateful widgets change depending on the state, right? So if any kind of new value has been updated and you want to change and you want to show the change on the screen, then that's for stateful widgets. And we can use set state to rebuild it. So let's see this in action. Now I'm going to create a very basic counter app here. So let's have a column. And let's just have some text saying you push the button this many times. Now it looks like it's at the very top, so I'm just going to access alignment to the middle. And let's just center everything. So we've got our message, and now let's show the actual counter value. So in a text widget, if you just show the counter, you can see it's a red squiggle because it's an integer. And to show it as a text, we have to convert it to a string. Cool, so there it is, just 0. Now it looks like it's quite tiny, so let's just change up the style for this text and make it much bigger. Awesome, and then the final thing we need is a button of some sorts. So one of the default widgets that Flutter has is called an elevated button. So when the user presses the button, let's just call that increment counter method. And let's see what this button looks like. Cool, there it is. Now if you click on the increment button, you can see it'll increase. And so if I just show you real quick, if I was to say, let's increment the counter, but you don't include the set state part of it, then it's not going to change. Now, the actual value of the counter in the code is increasing, but it's just not rebuilding the widget. So we can't see the fact that it changed. So that's what set state does. Okay, it rebuilds the widget to reflect the change. Awesome. Now, if you're a complete beginner, learning and understanding how a very basic app like this counter app and how it works it actually goes through some really important ideas. So I really recommend playing around with this and seeing what you can do. You can create calculators. I think that's a very good app to try to make as a challenge for yourself. Because if you think about what we made for this counter app, we looked at variables, we have a method to change the value of the variable, and then now we know some basic widgets to create the UI for it. And now you understand the difference between stateless and stateful widgets to create a counter app like this. Now let's continue on with our learning. So I've created another Flutter project. So again, I'm just going to delete everything below the main function to start from scratch. And let's create my app and our material app. And what we're going to do here is we're going to create a to-do app. So let's create that in a separate page folder. And so the main idea I want to show you with this to-do app, first of all, is getting the user's input. So in our counter app, all that we get from the user's input is just the user pressing a button. So now let's collect some more information from the user. So in the body, in the middle, I want to introduce you to another very important widget, which is called a text field. So without any further customization, if you just save this, you can see that text field at the middle there. And so if you click on it, you can actually start typing in the text field right away. And now it begs the question, well, how do we actually access what the user typed? So to do that, we need a text editing controller. So I'm just going to call it my controller. And if you look at this text field, one of the options here you can see is controller. So we can give it our controller. And so this controller just stores and gives us access to whatever the user typed in there. Cool. Now let's wrap this in a column so that we can have some other widgets here as well. Below the text field, I want to create another button. And let's say if the user presses this button, let's have a method to greet the user. And we haven't created this method, so let's just do that real quick. Sweet, there it is. Now let's just make sure to center this alignment so that we can bring it back to the middle. And now if I type in, say, Mitch, and I hit tap, and you can see with our controller, we have access to the text that the user typed. Sweet. Now, if you look at the text field, there's a lot of things you can customize about it. So if you look at the decoration and you have an input decoration, we can specify a border. Now, there's a lot of styles you can go for, but one that I usually go for is an outline border. And it looks like everything's stuck to the sides. So I'm just going to wrap everything in a padding. There we go. And one important thing that you should be using is a hint text. So you can see here that this is just a string. So the hint text is sort of the grayed out text for what you want the user to type in. Like give them a hint about what should be typed in here. So for example, let's say type your name. Sweet. So now that we can actually get the user's input and we can have access to it, let's actually spit back some information as well. So let's output something. So I want to have a greeting message. So let's just create that at the top. So I'm just going to have a string called greeting message, and let's just have a blank string at the beginning. And what we're going to do is when we greet the user, instead of just printing it to the console, let's try to print it on the app. So to do that, we're going to say greeting message is hello, and then let's just add on whatever the user typed in the controller. right? And since we want this to actually be reflected in the app when the change happens, we have to set the state, which again just means to rebuild this widget. Okay, sweet. So at the top, you can see nothing. Now, if I say type in your name and I hit tap, then it says hello Mitch. Cool. So I hope that made sense. Now, the main important thing that we learned just then is about the text field and using the controller to access what the user typed in the text field. Now, there are some coding practices that will help your code be more clean and easy to read. And so, for example, one thing we can optimize here is it's probably a good idea to just create another string here called username and then just store what the controller has in this string. And then so now we can just say, instead of directly going to the controller, we can just say add the username. So this will just make it easier for us to read the code later on.